This is Geek Revolution Radio,
a show for geeks by geeks. Hello and welcome to another edition of Geek Revolution Radio. I am your host, Ryan Bennett, and with me, as always, Will Hatton.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you doing, Will? How are things going?
Things are good. I'm pretty happy. It's been a good week.
It is January, though.
Definitely excited for today's episode.
Is it me, or does January just kind of seem like the Mondays of all the months? Like, it seems like every day's Monday.
I don't know. I work in a pretty high intense work, so weeks actually kind of flow by for me.
Yeah, Will Hatton, the Ron Burgundy of the. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I know that I've arrived in adulthood when I'm excited to go to the Home and Garden Show this weekend in Austin. I'm like, wow, I'm really adulting at this point. Like, you know, I'm turning 30 this year, and I'm not really quite sure what to think about it. But I already live like I'm 60. So
later.
So anyway, hey, hello and everybody, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. Thank you for listening to the show. Thanks for downloading, telling your friends. It's been kind of great to see the embrace of our audience and our listeners as we've come back. We see a lot of you out there interacting with the show. We've actually kind of moved the conversation between shows, I should say, to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Geek Revolution Radio, and we're kind of always posting news tidbits or interesting articles or things to talk about over there. And we've had quite a few of you reaching out to us and kind of chatting with us about different stuff. So thanks for all of you that are interacting with us. And if you would like to interact with us, you can head over to the Facebook page, and we're kind of running the feedback part of the show there. So
yeah, definitely love seeing the interaction there. Want to hear more from y'all. So
yeah, it's been great. Kind of woke up this morning, and generally when I wake up in the morning, I have the Yahoo app on my phone, and if anything news related that's
major,
kind of troubling or major has hit in the middle of the night, it's kind of like in my notification bar there, and I scrolled it open, first thing opening my eyes this morning, and I saw Alan Rickman dead at the age of 69, and wow, I did not see that coming at all.
No, I was at work, and my coworker found out and told everybody in the newsroom. I was just taken back by it. I mean, it's freaking Alan Rickman, man. It's
one of those things.
Legend.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, first of all, I didn't know Alan Rickman was 69. I didn't know he was the same age as David Bowie, who also passed recently. I mean, I guess it's shocking. It's a little shocking that David Bowie died, but he hasn't been as, I guess, in the media within the last 10 years like Alan Rickman has. I mean, Alan, of course, from starting with Die Hard, he's been kind of in the public conscience, but he's done a lot of, with Harry Potter, obviously. This guy is really in the minds of a lot of people right now, and it was really sad to hear. Like David Bowie, we lost another one of the good ones to cancer. And I'm not really sure what to think of all of it. It's kind of troublesome to me that we as humans are in general, living longer lives, except for this one thing, which is cancer, which seems to be taking out a whole bunch of us prematurely. And, kind of going back to, our president's State of the Union that he gave earlier this week, he kind of tasked Joe Biden with, let's climb on top of this cancer thing and let's figure it out. And for the sake of heroes out there like Alan Rickman, I hope that we're able to kind of tackle this thing so that we can, who knows what Alan Rickman or David Bowie or anybody else, family members, friends, what they would have done in the rest of their lives had they not been taken by this horrible disease. So how have you been kind of coping with this in your household, Will? I know you and your wife are huge Harry Potter fans, so I can imagine the first person I thought of actually when I heard the news was, oh, Will's wife has got to be so upset that Snape died.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's sad because the very first thing I did was text Anna Alan Rickman died. Like that's like the first thing she woke up to. And I thought about it later. I was like, that's no way to wake up. I mean, you experienced somewhat the similar thing. And I was like, I should have like written, I love you, good morning, ... Alan Rickman's dead. That probably would have been a better approach to it.
Right.
Softer blow. But
you're going for the shock and awe.
Yeah, I just like went right for the punch out. I personally am like, when celebrities die, it sucks. But I don't.
Some celebrities. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, some celebrities. Like others, you're just like, I mean, when Philip Seymour Hoffman died, I was pretty shaken up by that one, because that's another one that just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm trying to blank all of a sudden.
Well,
the comedian
Joker.
Robin Williams.
Yeah. Well, man. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that. That happened while we were on our hiatus. We never really got to talk. For me, Robin Williams, the entire thing with him passing is really quite a tragedy.
Yeah.
While yes, he did take his own life, it did come out afterwards that he was suffering from Parkinson's and he was starting to lose who he was. My father-in-law, technically, my mother's or my wife's father has Parkinson's, and I've watched him deteriorate. By the time I knew him, he was already well on his way downhill. But even since the time that I've been the last 10 or so years, we've watched him just decline in a horrific way. And to hear that after he died, that Robin Williams was sitting on the fact that he had Parkinson's and it was getting worse, and he was losing who he was, it was just, the whole thing is just so sad to me.
Well, yeah, and I think I look at all of these deaths and I say, I don't know these people personally. I don't connect with them on a interactive base where I interact with them and vice versa. It's all receiving from them. But the thing is, what we receive from these people is so inspirational, funny, powerful, like all these things. Like I just feel that deep sense of loss when we lose somebody like Alan Rickman. And I think life will go on, but we just won't have that. That there won't be another performance that we got to see in Dogma or
he's the voice of God.
Hard.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin.
Yeah, we won't get to see those again because he's no longer with us. But
right after I thought of Anna, because you guys are. I mean, she's a Potter fan, like I'm a Star Wars fan. It's
right. She's literally watching. I think she's watching Harry Potter right now. Yeah, it's either that or one of his other films, just to essentially honor. I think that's the best thing that we can do is just go out and watch the things that we loved them in.
Yeah,
and cherish those moments. Like I think I watched Good Will Hunting shortly after Robin Williams died, just because that's my favorite film of his. That's the thing that I see him connecting with me the most. So.
Well, when Robin Williams died, there's a lot of stuff. I guess he kind of first flew into my radar as the voice of Genie on Aladdin, because I was a kid at that time, you know what I mean? But for me, like you watched Good Will Hunting, the first movie I went to after he died was Dead Poets Society, because that movie, when I was about 20 years old, I don't think I even saw it until I was about 20. And when I saw it, it was kind of in a little bit of a dark time in my life, and that movie moved me. It's just such a great movie.
Like that one and Good Will Hunting are like the two like life-changing early adolescent. Like I watched those both when I was about 20. Yeah. Just like the same. It's like a very pivotal point in, I think, a man's life. Like he's really connecting with the world, I guess. And those are really good kind of tutorials on life, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing better than watching, at the end of the movie, like Robin Williams was in his real life, they saluted him, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," I mean, it's just, the whole thing is really sad. And kind of going back to what we've been talking about, specifically with Heath Ledger passing, it's one of those things where like I always, when I'm sitting and I'm watching The Dark Knight Rises, which I hate, I don't like it at all. Like, and I think the reason I think I've figured out the reason that I don't like that movie is because every time I watch it, it's a constant reminder of what could have been.
Yeah,
specifically with the Joker and Heath Ledger. I mean, I'd been seeing Heath Ledger movies forever, from 10 Things I Hate About You to
right.
Knight's Tale. I mean, and then he blew the lid off with the Joker. I mean, it's just, for me, it's my favorite performance in any movie ever, including any Star Wars movie. I still love watching The Dark Knight. It's such a great film to me.
It's a freaking amazing movie.
Yeah, and then, it just, every time, I just can't help but wonder, like, not even just with Batman, but after Batman, what could have been if Heath Ledger, was still around. It's so sad. And going back to, cancer, it's not just celebrities that are dying from cancer. Everybody knows somebody that's died from cancer. Family, friends, coworkers, you name it. And it's so devastating that it's such with all the problems that we have solved or are on the verge of solving, it's so sad that that's still a thing that's just, it's really kind of a big question mark in everybody's life that, yeah, we all want to live to be 90 or 100, but that can kick in from any age in your life, from when you're born, and just basically put a a timestamp on your head that you've only got this many months or years or days left to live. And I guess every time somebody dies, and I didn't know Alan Rickman, of course. I knew him, but he didn't know me. I feel like I have a relationship, like probably most of you do, with people we watch in movies and see on TV. And and even though I might not have known him personally, I really enjoyed the heights he went to try and entertain me as a viewer. And, when we lose another person like him to cancer or any disease, really, it's just so devastating.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to live with something like that. And
yeah. And it's been wonderful seeing the outpour of support and love for him and David Bowie, on social media and in the news and stuff like that. They actually we have a street here in Austin. I think it's called Bowie Street or Bowie Avenue or something like that.
I saw like a meme of that. Like somebody threw David Bowie on there.
Yeah, they climbed basically on the pole where the street sign's at and turned it into David Bowie, and technically it's vandalism or whatever you want to call it. But the city of Austin decided to leave it up for a little while. And honestly, I hope it starts a thing where they just decide to rename the street.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I mean, I think they should. So anyway, we wanted to kind of take a minute out of the first part of the show and kind of pay our tribute to some of the people that we've lost in the last little while, specifically Alan Rickman this week. So let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about true crime. This week's show.
Yeah, let's lighten the mood and talk about.
Let's talk about real life crime.
Yeah,
we're gonna get into Making a Murderer. We're gonna get into some other true crime type stuff. Will is set up an interview that he's going to be doing later in the show. So we'll probably have that interview on and get maybe a change in perspective from that interview, and then close out the show after that interview and see if it changes our opinions. He hasn't done the interview yet as we're recording this. He's going to do it probably tomorrow. So we're going to kind of discuss it with our current opinions from what we currently know, listen to the interview, see if it enforces our changes, and give a wrap up. And you can join the conversation, of course, on Facebook.com/Geek Revolution Radio. If you have any strong opinions, like a lot of people do.
I'm sure there are some serious, like anytime you bring up this topic, people go nuts. People like talk about like their emotions and like what they think and get really heated into it. So this is a great topic to discuss. Yeah,
it's kind of speaking to that. Our friends over at the other Mike and Mike show, they put up a poll on their Facebook page today, basically asking people, what do you think? Do you think he's guilty? Do you think he's innocent, or do you not know? And it obviously, I had to jump in because we were going to discuss this, and I'm pretty opinionated, I guess we would say, about the whole thing. And I think that these guys are going to be doing a show in the next week or two about Making a Murderer specifically. And I right now I'm set up to be a guest host on the, or I guess a panelist, whatever you want to call it, on that show. So you can head over there and listen to more of me if you know once a week is not enough of a fix for you. So they're doing a really good show though over there at the Other Mike and Mike show. You can find them online at theothermikes.com. They're a podcast just like us. You can download them anywhere, and it's Mike T and Mike W that are doing it. So it's interesting. The reason I wanted to bring it up is because they did a poll, and I'm looking at it right now, and I think I just want to jump into Making a Murderer, but I feel like before we do that, we probably should talk about other stuff. True Detective, for example.
When we decided to do this episode, I was kind of left pondering, like, why true crime? Why do we get into it? Why do people like it? And it left me like, I actually looked it up. Basically, true crime is categorized as any piece of literature or film, like the genre that explores what an actual crime existed. So it's like true fiction. Mm-hmm. Or I mean, it's kind of tricky because it's also
it's nonfiction.
It's not fiction. So it's nonfiction. It examines actual crimes and the actions that real people conducted. So, I mean, true crime is specific in the that it relates to nonfiction, and I think people in general are really fascinated by true crime. I think they're really fascinated by other genres of, I guess, crime. You know, you've got like serial killer movies, you've got gangster movies.
If we look at like, you know, going back a year ago, the Jinx that HBO put on. I mean, not exact. It's a kind of a mix of true crime, I guess, because they were interviewing the guy that was doing it, but throughout the show and them exploring this things that happened, you know, all over the United States. The bombshell, of course, you know, the whole time you're watching the show from episode to episode, and it's really the brilliant part of the storytelling on the part of the person making the documentary. But you'll go from 1 minute thinking, oh, this guy's definitely guilty, to the next minute going, I don't know if he's guilty. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with it, is you look at it and you go, man, like that's the thing about all true crime. I feel like I bounce back and forth between this. Is he guilty? Is he not? Mm-hmm. Did he do it? Did he not? And you pretty much at the end of the Jinx, you're like, yeah, that dude did it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing I liked specifically about the Jinx that maybe we didn't get with Making a Murderer is we got the bombshell at the very end of the movie where he's in the bathroom connected to the audio. He doesn't know.
Why are you doing this? You know,
because you did it. Yeah, and
right. Exactly.
Like as soon as they didn't even discover that he had said that until like a year later when they went to cut up all the audio on the show. And as soon as that episode aired, it was like 3 days later, and the dude was you know, arraigned on charges in California.
Yeah,
he's been in prison ever since then. So
yeah,
I mean, it's really, for me, it was a really interesting show. It had a really interesting backstory and story throughout, and then it just ended with a bombshell. It was a very satisfying ending.
That's why I think I liked the show, because that's the problem when you start to get into these shows. You go,
yeah,
am I going to get a satisfying result? You know, are we going to find out that this person did it?
Yeah.
You know, yes or no? Are we going to, you know, what is the result going to be? And I feel like a lot of times you get to the end and you're just like, well, you know, that sucks. Didn't get the ending that I wanted.
Did you see a show called The Killing?
Yeah, no, I see, and this is the thing. Like, I feel like The Killing was one of those shows where it's like the mystery crime genre where you're just like, you don't know who did it.
Yeah.
And you still don't know who did it until the very end, you know, until they really do the reveal.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the flip side. That's fiction, you know, that's just a written story, and kind of guess how True Detective is on HBO, and I really like it. I got I mean, I dove in head first with you. I think I watched The Killing based on your recommendation. And, it was already well on its way, pretty much wrapped up, I think, the whole series. And I blasted through that whole show, like 5 seasons or whatever it was. I did the same thing with True Detective season 1. I didn't start watching it till it was out. And it was so great. It was such a great journey, The
True Detective is really probably one of the biggest television conundrums I could think of. Like season 1 was so perfect
compared to season 2.
Season 2 was so horrific. Like just complete flip side, complete opposites. I literally left. I watched the entire season 2. Like I know some people. Me too.
I hung in there. Yeah.
Some people gave up. I hung in there, and I wish I didn't. I wish I left angry.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to leave a movie or a TV show angry.
Yeah.
I might not like it. I might not feel good about it, but to actually be angry, it just, that's just it gets under your skin.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you mean. I mean, it's, True Detective season 1 is even good enough that I would go back and watch it. As a matter of fact, I probably will at some point go back and rewatch it because it's so good. Season 2, it's. I wanted to ask you, I guess, Will. Season 2 was so horrific. Are you going to watch season 3? It's going to be its own story again.
I've been reading up on it, hearing whether they are or not. I mean, I know that the showrunner has like a contract with HBO to make stuff on HBO for like 2 or 3 more seasons, but that might not necessarily mean he's going to do season 3. It's still, or True Detective is still up in the air. I think I would, because some of the things I've heard about, like the executives at HBO were really rushing him to put out a product, and the luxury that he had with the first season is he had written it before he, basically went to them.
Well, yeah, he sold it to them. Yeah.
He basically had a long time to compile it. Whereas in, some people don't work under pressure that well. And if HBO execs can work with him in a manner that is positive for his writing style or his ability to create, then yeah, I think I would give it a shot. But if the first episode sucks, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, I took your recommendation last week, and I did listen to the Serial podcast season 1.
Nice.
And of course, it has started into season 2, which is a totally different story. So if you guys haven't listened to that show and you're interested in this kind of stuff, season 1 of Serial podcast is really good. It's put on by the same people who do This American Life. It's NPR. It's NPR. I mean, it's very highly produced. Sounds, it melts like butter on your ears when you're listening to it.
Well, it's crazy too, because like Anna was driving to work every day for like 45 minutes to an hour, and so she would listen to it on her way to work and back, and she listened to like 3 or 4 episodes, and she's like, "You've got to listen to it." Mm-hmm. And I wasn't doing anything. I was, it was like around Christmas time last year. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll catch up. And I listened to like 8 episodes in the matter of like 2 days.
Yeah.
And man, that show, it like, again, kind of going back to that back and forth feeling. Like, did he do it? Did he not do it? I don't know. I feel like it's weird how there's this sense of, and we're going to dive into this idea when we talk about making a murderer. But if Adnan killed her, but they did a horrible job in the courtroom, do the means justify the end?
That's the thing, is at the end of season, unlike Making a Murderer, at the end of season 1 of the Serial podcast, I was definitely leaning more heavily towards, this guy, we basically listened to a whole bunch of interviews with a psychopath. Like he's definitely a guy that,
well, that's the
he
thing.
definitely killed her. I mean, based purely on Jay's testimony in the podcast, there's no way that Jay could have dreamed all of that up.
Right.
and they definitely could place. It's not even, because for the longest time I was saying Jay killed her, but they were able to place Anand with Jay pretty much for the entire day. So
I felt like when I got to the end, I felt like I had asked myself the same question. It's like either this guy is a complete sociopath that's able to manipulate and lie so well that it's just painfully deceiving.
Yeah.
Or, they're like, he didn't do it. And there's some serious issues. I still to this day don't trust Jay and don't trust anything that he said because I feel like he lied so much in his testimonies.
Right. And I kind of go over, I couldn't, in that particular case, they kept talking about when they were doing some, I guess, detective and investigating work for a serial podcast. They found that there was a bunch of serial killers, a bunch of killers by a serial killer in that same area around.
That had been working in that area.
Yeah, around the same time. The one guy, he had been out of prison, like early January, he got out of prison, and it could have, I guess, very easily have also been him, but they weren't able to tie this guy to all of the murders that had happened around that area. So I also wondered maybe Anand could be one of the serial killers, and
he might have very well had a very large hand in it, or he might have just, there's just way too much unknowns there, and that's the thing. There's the court, listening to the issues that came out in court and listening to the whole bit about all the things that happened to him in court, I just feel like there was way too much doubt.
Yeah. Like reasonable doubt. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why I feel like, he did it or not, I don't know. But the reality is I feel like because he wasn't given just opportunity in court, his lawyer was shady, or maybe not shady, but iffy.
Not
she was
good.
Definitely iffy.
Yeah.
There were definitely some weird things going on there.
Yeah.
Definitely don't like that.
Yeah. And that podcast at the very end, it, like a lot of these things end up, it was a little bit of a dissatisfying ending because these are not stories like true crime and in these other things. It's, this is real life stuff, and it doesn't always have an ending, and it certainly doesn't always have a happy ending. And that kind of leads us to Making a Murderer.
Well, actually, I wanted to jump into one thing real quick. Have you ever seen the movie Alpha Dogs?
I haven't.
Alpha Dog.
No.
Okay, this is probably, in terms of true crime, this is a true story, or it's inspired by true events. I would say this is at the top of anybody's list of movies to watch. I highly recommend it. It's got Ben Foster in it. It's got Emile Hirsch, Sharon Stone, Bruce Willis, Justin Timberlake, Anton Yelchin. I could never say his name right. He's the guy from Star Trek, or the new movies anyway. It's a very, very fascinating true crime movie. I think true crime movies are pretty interesting because it's like a full story just right there in a nice little 2-hour bit. But it basically, because you haven't seen it, I don't get to dive into it as much. I'm going
to watch it. Yeah. So.
But I highly recommend it. It's like basically this kid gets kidnapped by these two, I think they're affiliated with drugs somehow. These two dudes kidnap him because the kid's brother owes them money or something like that. And it's this whole spiral of all the things that go on while this kid is being kidnapped. It's an A+. I love the movie, so I highly recommend it. Anybody that hasn't seen Alpha Dog, I keep throwing S on the end. Alpha Dogs makes it sound like some cheesy, dog movie where it's like a soldier that actually is a dog, and he's,
the sequel to All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Yeah, or like Air Bud, something like Alpha Dogs.
Alpha Dogs.
Yeah.
So let's check. Yeah, I'll check. I'm definitely gonna check that out. I really like those types of movies.
Yeah, it's got it's got a really good cast. I think that's the other part about it. It's really well done, and it's got a great cast, and it's a really intriguing story.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dive into Making a Murderer again.
Oh my goodness!
If you have, I don't know if you're supposed to say spoiler alert because it's based on a real life thing that's been in the news, but it's a show, a documentary, specifically a real life documentary on Netflix. It kind of hit my Netflix queue. Didn't really pay much attention to it until I started seeing like literally everybody on Facebook talking about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how I got into it. Like somebody it suggested it at work. It's
definitely
or
word of mouth. This thing blew up by word of mouth.
Yeah, it blew up really quickly. Everybody was like hitting it up on social media.
Right. So it follows the story of Steven Avery, a guy that was basically he was put in prison for 18 years on a rape charge that they later determined through DNA evidence that, hey, it wasn't him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let him out. And so I think the intent of the documentary was to start out with, following this guy and kind of documenting, they shot it over about 10 years and kind of documenting how you get your life back together after you've been wrongfully imprisoned for 18 years from the age he was 18 to, 36 or whatever it is.
Yeah. I look at it and you could literally just watch the first 2 episodes and be like, man,
this is crazy.
That is messed up, man.
Yeah.
Like that dude got wronged.
Yeah.
And the level of wrongness committed against him is horrific. And
his entire life has been taken from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, like all of his family, his wife, his kids, everything twice was completely taken from him. And it really, honestly, I mean, just the first part of it already makes me like sick that we have a justice system in this country where that can happen, because it makes me wonder, like, how many other people are in prison for something they didn't even do. Like,
well, the thing that strikes me as being really crazy about this case is how a personal relationship with he has this relationship with his cousin. She has a relationship. She's married to somebody on the sheriff's department. He's a deputy. And that connection alone is what took his life away, essentially. Like if he was just another guy, like he probably would have done some time for what he did to his cousin. He basically ran her off the road, pointed a gun at her, whether or not it was loaded. I think a crime was committed there.
Allegedly. They never even determined if he actually did it. They never charged him for it.
He spoke about doing it. I feel like there was enough evidence there. I mean, even allegedly, it's still wrong that happens, but like that incident right there is what spiraled everything else. I feel like about, it caused a grudge with him and the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
They took that hatred of him and basically framed him for rape.
Yeah, and I mean they made it pretty clear throughout the show that the sheriff's department and the city or the county in general had a problem in general with his entire family. I mean, it was pretty clear that these are lower
black sheep,
lower middle class to poor people living in trailer. There are things that come along with that. There was probably plenty of domestic disturbances and all that. I'm sure there was tons of that stuff, but that's no reason to just straight up take 18 of honestly somebody's prime years away from them. It's just not.
Well, and that's the thing. So right there, you say, what has resulted from this county's decision to do this? One, it takes somebody's life away from them and puts them in jail for 18 years.
Yeah.
Two, the woman that did get raped, she's in turn has to cope with this under a realization that that she sent the wrong person away, and three, the person that actually committed more crimes,
more rapes afterwards. Really,
he wouldn't have been able to commit had he been in jail.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, they tagged the wrong guy because of a personal vendetta. Allowed the real guy that was running around raping people to rape, I think they said 2 or maybe even 3 more people before they caught him. It's mind blowing. Like think about how those victims must feel about that. Manitowoc County.
This would have never happened. Heck? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is what really hooks you in the first 2 episodes. You're like, this guy has been so wronged that when you find out what happens in the next 8 episodes, knowing what happened to him then, it really sets it up to want to give this guy a continual benefit of the doubt just because he was so wronged.
Well, here's the thing. You asked, before you started into that, what does it do to a guy like that when it happens? And I think this is something not a lot of people are talking about. The show is called Making a Murderer. I think honestly, no matter which side that you fall, let's assume for a minute that he is guilty and he did end up killing this Teresa Halbach chick. Right. Him being in prison for 18 years turned him into a murderer. They made him into a murderer.
Yeah, I could see that. I think if anything, if it didn't make him a murderer, it made him a basket case. It made him just a shell of what he was.
Absolutely. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. So we can get in kind of what happened after that. So there's, a lot of you guys have already seen it, but basically basically the charred remains of a woman from Auto Trader that takes pictures of cars that he was selling they find fragments of her bones on his property and her car. Anyway, let's just fast forward past explaining all that, because I'm guessing if you're listening to this,
we're not telling the story of it. Go and watch the show. I mean, that'll do the storytelling for you. We're going to talk about what the pivotal points that we like and don't like about the story.
Right. So let's get this right out of the way. Will, do you think he did it, or do you think he's guilty?
I honestly don't know. And this is a feeling of being on the fence. What I do know, I don't like that Manitowoc County had anything to do with the investigation. I don't like that the jurors were from that county. I don't like that
that they had the entire
DA, everything
the judge,
everything that was corrupt about that county played a role in his hearings, his court dates, everything. And so I have this general sense of all the things that were compiled over the course of the whole series. You say all these things adding up don't really sit well with me. It makes me kind of sick to my stomach. But that doesn't, at the same time, all those things are horrible, but that doesn't mean that he did or didn't do it,
Right. So here's where I fall on it. Okay. And I actually just ran over and looked at theothermikes.com. Our friends over at the Other Mike and Mike show. They had a poll going, and their poll right now reads 33% for guilty, 15% for undecided, and 52% for innocent. Yeah. So it seems like in this case, from this, sample audience, the majority of people don't think that he did it. Here's where I fall. Yeah. To me, based on what they showed in this show and kind of I haven't read a whole lot outside of the show.
We could talk about that.
We're going to get to it, but based only and purely on the way that the court case was handled. Yeah. The way, like you said, the evidence was found and or planted by the guys that had no business being on the crime scene in the first place. Were told not to be on the crime scene, and when they were there, were supposed to be heavily watched and weren't at all. The way that the entire thing was handled, including his proceedings with the judge deciding what evidence was admissible and wasn't admissible. In my opinion, it does not matter if Steven Avery killed or did not kill this woman. He should have gotten off on the 12 technicalities, pick one, based purely on the fact that what happened to him, and honestly must happen to a lot of Americans, was a gross abuse of what the justice system in this country is supposed to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's hard. You can't. I don't like to think that he did or didn't do it, you know, but the fact that all the things that happened for him in terms of due process, in terms of having your day in court, he wasn't given that. And
the cards are stacked against him in every imaginable way. And this is a thing, Will. I'm guessing that it's not just Steven Avery.
Oh yeah,
I'll bet you if you really took the time to look at it, you could find
hundreds of cases,
tens and hundreds of thousands of cases that are exactly the same way, where either the people are like his nephew, or they're too dumb to defend themselves,
or too dumb or too broke,
or they cannot afford to hire the right kind of lawyer to defend themselves, like also happened to his nephew.
Well, you know, the thing that I keep thinking about when I look at whether he did it or not, I keep thinking of, like, you watch these shows and you put yourself in the mind of the killer. I did it when I listened to Serial. You know, I try to relate because Adnan is right around the same age as me. I think we graduated the same year. And so I'm like, that's a part of my life, you know, like hearing him talking about Best Buy, going and being in high school, like I kind of went back in memory lane a little bit and thinking about my own life.
Right.
And so when I'm watching this show, I'm like trying to put my mind in where he would be at. You've got a guy that's not very smart. Like, Steven Avery is not smart.
No. I mean, let's come out and say it. They're hillbillies. There's nothing wrong with that. There are hillbillies in the world. There are people that are not all that smart. Okay, it's it's a thing. Like, we all know somebody. I live down the street from a whole bunch of them. Not a big deal, but does that mean that these people should be prosecuted, marginalized, should be wrongfully imprisoned? Should they be targeted? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And here's the thing: when I think about whether he did it or not, I think he's not a smart person. But he works with automobiles all day long. He literally has a compactor that crushes cars. You know, he's got means to, like, he has so many opportunities, so many options to better dispose of everything.
The thing about it is
and it doesn't take a genius. The stupid person working in that field for their entire life. Well, he didn't have a life, but his family does. He has access to those things. It's shocking to me that
if he did do it, why would he be so careless? Right?
Yeah. Why? Yeah.
He's not an idiot, especially since he knows he's lucky he got out the first time. You know,
right?
He obviously has a pretty good understanding of the justice system, being that this was the second major part of his life that he's already been through.
This, how it works.
Yeah, he's already been in the three-ring circus, you know. And the thing about it that doesn't stick for me is there still is no motive for him to kill her specifically. Right. I don't understand what the motive could have possibly been. That was
the big. After I watched this show, I go, like, I don't, like, I was talking to my wife. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't get the motive. Why?
Yeah, if he was gonna kill somebody, he had a whole list of people, I'm sure, that he and every, you know, like, if they would have said, oh, he turned around and killed the sheriff that put him in prison for 18 years, I'd have been like, well, no kidding, he did. Like, not that surprising.
Well,
you know?
I look at the physical evidence and I say the two pieces of main evidence that were against him, I full-heartedly, if you polled me, I'd say were planted. I believe 100% were planted. I believe the RAV4, I believe his blood was planted, and I believe that the key was planted.
I know that, okay, so they kind of uncovered in the court case that the RAV4 was definitely something, it was at least planted, because the one guy they interviewed, he called into dispatch, and he was supposedly at this point had never seen that vehicle because they had never found her or the car. And he was asking about the license plate numbers. And before the dispatch person could even tell him what kind of car it was, he told the dispatch person what kind of car it was, which means the only way you could have possibly known that.
Sergeant Andrew Colburn.
Exactly. The only way he could have known that.
And Link are the two guys that I think are, like, the defense attorneys really try to paint these guys in bad light, and the prosecutor didn't like that they were being thrown under their bus, but I think they were being thrown under the bus for good reason. These guys, I think, are shady, and they're doing the dirty work for the county sheriff.
Right. And back to what I was saying, like he couldn't have known the things he knew at that moment without him sitting there staring right at the vehicle.
Yeah,
that supposedly they hadn't found yet.
When that part came up, and they're like,
it was
how
a grenade.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
He's like, so again, he's not a smart guy, and there's not really any valuable, in my opinion, physical evidence. The fact that they think she was killed in the garage is crazy to me. I'm like, they're like,
I thought, what happened to the whole the bed thing, and they slit her throat. Yeah, they said, oh well, the first story was that I've said, oh, we slit her, we raped her and we slit her throat. Meanwhile, they can't find a drop of blood inside the house. So if that's possible at all, this is the most. How do you clean up something like that? I have no idea.
Well, yeah, even if you shoot her in the garage, which the prosecutors are claiming that's what happened, he's not going to be able to clean that up.
Yeah,
they picked that garage apart.
And didn't find
any physical evidence. They found a bullet piece of bullet.
Well, the bullet they found, it was 6 months after the first time they went through everything.
And so who's to say that was or wasn't sitting there? I mean, that's the thing. That's my biggest issue with this whole investigation and court hearings. There are so many moments where you're like, that is clearly something wrong. A sensible person can see somebody screwed up. Somebody did the wrong.
I mean, you can't convict somebody, and the thing that bothered me about the whole show, you are innocent until you are proven guilty. If they have any reasonable doubt that you didn't do what you did,
then
they
have
can't
to go
convict
back
you.
And find better evidence.
No, they can't even go back and find. They have to exonerate him because they're in court already. You can't go back and you can't. There's no such thing as double jeopardy. You can't double jeopardy. It's done. I don't know how the jurors, who by the way went into deliberations with, they did a poll of them going into deliberations that 7 of them thought he was innocent,
out not guilty. Yeah,
3 of them weren't sure, or 2 of them weren't sure, and 3 of them thought he was guilty. And then they came out with everybody, all 12 of them across the board, saying he absolutely, without a doubt, did it.
After the series, I read up something saying that essentially the jurors were kind of pressured by the prosecution to do that. Right.
I mean, I don't know where do you fall. Let's go back to the garage. Okay, so after the fact, they say, we found this bullet 6 months later, and we found a strand of evidence on it. I mean, the car and everything is very easy to explain. The RAV4, if it was planted, they already proved that the vial of his blood DNA was, tampered with in the evidence locker that they only had access to. They did a phony test that's never been tested in 10 years that didn't really tell them anything. All it told them was, yes, they aren't sure what they aren't sure of. They didn't detect it. That doesn't mean that it wasn't in there from the vial. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, and then all of a sudden 6 months later they go, oh, we're going to go in this garage. And despite the fact that there's cracks in the floor that blood could have gotten down into that we're going to chip out, we're going to find one stray bullet. And then on this bullet is going to be a little bit of her DNA. And that's going to, basically close the casket on the whole thing.
Oh man. The woman that did the DNA test, she should have been thrown out right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a weird feeling about her. The first time they introduced her, I was just like, something ain't sitting right about her. I don't understand. And then, if basically they disproved in Steven Avery's case that they didn't charge him for, I should say, the supposed rape and throat slashing and stuff that happened in the bedroom, how did they then turn around and also convict the nephew? If what he said about that place didn't happen at all, I don't understand.
I drew the same conclusion. I baffled.
Yeah, and there's been some news going around, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit, Will, that there's a lot of stuff in the show that maybe they didn't cover, or maybe they were being a little one-sided.
Well, I going into the show, before I even started the first episode, I had heard that there was some shocking stuff that wasn't revealed in the show that goes against him. So going into the show, I have this in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I finished the show, I went online and I started reading everything. And the prosecutor, who anything the prosecutor says, I'm going to pull up his name real quick because this guy is just
this is the guy that
Ken Kratz, the special prosecutor. He has got the high-pitched voice. The one that was doing the sexting. Yeah.
This is the sexting guy that lost his job like not even too long after that.
He actually made an appearance on Fox News on the Kelly File. She interviewed him for a couple minutes, and then she interviewed Steven Avery's attorney.
He had the two attorneys.
She interviewed just one of them.
Right.
And I think the Dean Strang was the guy's name. And so I felt like she did a really good job of interviewing these guys. And in the interview, Ken Kratz, the special prosecutor, basically says that there was physical evidence underneath the latch of the RAV4 that wasn't blood. And they're saying that he basically is saying, like, it's not blood. How can it get there? Like, it's, blood is one thing, but like he would have to have touched it, for it to get caught under the hood latch. But the reality is that guy is so suspect that I don't believe a word he's saying.
Right.
Like, even if that came out in court, the RAV4 to me is inadmissible. Like, it goes out. I don't believe in it, and I don't believe in the special prosecutor because of the way that he basically manipulated the story in that special, press conference where he's like, this is a heinous crime. It's not just that he killed her, but he killed her, and mutilated the body and had sex with, raped her and all this stuff.
Right.
I don't like the guy. And because of that, anything that's come out post show, I feel like is coming from him. And I feel like it's inadmissible. I feel like in my slate of things that I believe or don't believe from the show, anything that he says is suspect.
So kind of, I guess this would have been in the last episode, and they did kind of, the creators of the documentary got the lawyers back together and some other detectives, that were working as basically side guys on this that, weren't working for the county.
I think they were investigators for the attorneys.
They got back together and kind of talked a little bit. And I don't know if you noticed, I definitely noticed that the lawyers that worked on this case, you could definitely tell that everything they had known about the justice system and about how they thought life worked was broken at that point. Like, they just seemed like such deflated people because it, as they stated in the show, it's so obvious that he should not be convicted of this for a multitude of reasons. The fact that if they planted even one piece of evidence, even if he did do it, you should not go to prison. I mean, that is not okay. Right. Because, then what happens when somebody that doesn't do it and, everything hangs on a key for a RAV4 that really had no way of getting there in the first place. Like, that's the thing that bothers me the most. I think I feel the same way those lawyers do, where this show really shook up my trust and belief in our justice system in this country in general. And just the cards are stacked against us. We saw it happen right in front of us.
Yeah. I mean, you listening to that one attorney of his at the end just saying, I hope he did it because, if he didn't do it, this is just a travesty, exactly what you said. Like, his life is just taken away. Like,
he's had 2 years in between, like 0 to 18, and then 2 years in his mid 36s.
Yeah.
36 and 37 were some sweet years. And then
I look at all of this whole story, and I feel like it kind of, like, in a sense, like there's so many things that like cause and effect that led to what happened, but I feel like there's one pivotal moment in 1985 when he's being when he was first accused of raping that woman, that would have changed the course of the rest of his life. And basically, it's that I kind of want to go back to this. Was the woman Judy Dvorak, the deputy, who interviewed the woman that got raped? She's the one that gave her the description. It was like a blonde-haired guy, scruffy. You know, she gave the description, and the deputy that was taking the notes basically took that description and said, "That's Steven Avery."
Right.
Like,
and then turned around and made a sketch based off him looking at a picture. I feel like
her role in it, and Gene Kushek, Tom Kokoruk, whatever you say his name.
Yeah, I never really could figure out how to say his name.
Yeah, these are all names I'm not at all familiar with. But those two, their role right there, like her role in saying that's Steven Avery, and his role in drawing the picture, that changed the course of his life. Because if he doesn't go to prison for rape, he probably is not going to be in a situation where he, did or didn't kill this woman.
Even if he was still, we're going to minority report this a little bit, but even if he was in the situation where, yes, at some point he would have killed, we are allowed to do. That's why we are free people. We have our agency to be able to decide if we're going to kill our neighbor or if we're not going to kill our neighbor. You can't just imprison somebody on the idea that someday they might do something bad or a prejudice because you don't like them. That's not okay, and I mean, and this was, this had nothing to do with race at all, which was, kind of surprising. Usually it's all race based, but this was white on white crime going on here. Well,
you had written down earlier, like in our show notes, you had said that there's so many other people that could have been investigated in terms of their role in the murder, like the roommate, her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, the brother.
And let's keep in mind who found the RAV4. Not only who found the RAV4, but who walked straight to the RAV4 and was the only person in the search crew that was given a camera, because they knew damn well that these guys were going to be finding something.
So iffy, so shady.
Yeah, that's where and the problem with it is because this case went all the way to trial and all of that, just like in the O.J. Simpson case or any other case you want to look at, they are not now going to turn around and try and figure out who killed Teresa Halbach.
Yeah, it's too late now. They can't go back.
No, they could, but they're not going to because there's nothing in it for them anymore. And that's the kind of, justice system that we live in, where they're going to try and pin it on somebody. And if they did do it, then great. And if they didn't do it, well, then we're never going to know who did it.
Right.
No, as far as I know, nobody has ever looked into if O.J. Simpson, for all intents and purposes, I guess he didn't do it because they didn't, if we're going off of the fact that they didn't put him in prison for that, they never spent any time trying to figure out after that who killed. In this case, they never turned around and said, okay, this could or couldn't go, but we need to make sure that we're looking at everybody around this situation to see if everyone else has an alibi, if there could be another, person who would have the roommate. To me, the roommate, the ex-boyfriend, even the brother seemed just as likely to me or more likely to me to have killed her than Steven Avery.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You at the end of the show, you go, okay, if Steven Avery didn't do it, you start eliminating the list of people that you think did do it. Just because you're playing your own private or your own personal detective, you're like, well, let's break it down. And I honestly think the biggest suspect in my mind is Brendan Dassey's brother, Bobby, the one that was an eyewitness that she was there. That she was like he was like basically the other last person to see her alive.
Right.
Because him and the guy that he went camping with, the father-in-law or like stepfather, whoever Tadaki is, that guy, the two of them, I think, are more in cahoots and had a role in her death than they weren't even investigated.
Right. And I think they were just straight up lying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just as much likelihood to me that they killed her as they saw her. I don't think they saw her at all, personally. I think he just made it up. You know what I mean?
Who knows? I mean, that's the thing, because we don't know.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that you got to think of it too let's look at this from Teresa Halbach's perspective. She knows who killed her. I mean, it's got to be, if it was Steven Avery, great. Even then, maybe not so great, because he's getting a lot of press that he didn't do it, so she really hasn't received her justice. But if it was anyone else in the world besides him that killed her, she's, wherever she's at right now, it's got to be maddening to know, kind of like in The Killing, they've got the wrong guy. Person's out running around, potentially, just like in, Steven Avery's other case, running around raping more people, killing other people.
See, you say you put the whole criminal justice system in question, and I do too at some degree, but I honestly was contemplating becoming a detective. I have a really good friend that's a detective, and he, he hasn't watched the show yet, I don't think, but just trying to put my mind in the aspect of law enforcement. I think he would agree with me to this, that as a detective, you're sworn to the citizens that you work for, the city, the jurisdiction that you're in, to give people, to investigate to the fullest. And to, if Steven Avery did commit the crimes, do it in the right ways. Don't do it in a political manner. Don't do it in a very shady manner, because I feel like the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department should have just put themselves out of the investigation, which they sort of did.
Tried
they didn't
to
do it its entirety. They tried to.
They just couldn't stay away. Yeah,
they couldn't stay away. And second, the state. I don't really trust the state investigators, because those guys basically just manipulated and just wrecked a 16-year-old boy into giving them what they wanted.
Yeah.
And that's not true. That's not good investigation. That's not ethical in my mind. And I feel like, as somebody that would support law enforcement, I would say, you got to do it the right way. You don't care, if you're going to, step on people's toes, or if you're going to, make the higher ups angry with you. You got to do it the right way.
Right. I mean, I feel like with everything that went on the auxiliaries, with anybody that was employed in the county or working for the county, from prosecutors on up and down, I think that the unethical or some of the things they did were illegal. So some of the crimes that they committed, in my opinion, are as bad as what he did, based only on the fact that it completely damages the trust in the public, and the trust the public has in them to do their job. And unlike your perspective, I used to be in law enforcement. I've been through the police academy. I was a prisoner. I didn't go to I got a job as a corrections officer at the prison in Utah. And, I could have, at some point in my career spun off from that and gone to be a road cop. But once I got in the prison and observed the other officers that worked in the prison, I knew at that moment that it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I just knew it was not for me, because those were some of the shadiest people I have ever been in contact with in my entire life. In my opinion, there were far more inmates in that prison that were more trusting to me than those prisoners that worked in that the guards that worked in that prison.
Yeah, it makes me think of
that to me, just it kind of changed me, and it jaded me a little bit. So maybe I'm on the other side of the spectrum from you, but I know that the guys that have been doing this a long time, the life gets to you. Most of what we covered in the police academy was how to cope with the things you're about to experience that you shouldn't have to. And so, yeah, it's not that surprising that they would go after somebody like Steven Avery, and that they really don't care who actually did it. They don't care. They just want to convict somebody and move on. That's all they care about.
It's all about numbers, and that's the one thing about the criminal justice system that I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, and you made a comment that, they're supposed to protect and defend us. Maybe I'm a little extreme in this opinion. In my opinion, they don't. They have used and abused our trust, especially in the last 2 years. If you want to talk about the last 2 years and all of the things that have been going on in this country, those mostly being race related.
Unfortunately,
they have no interest whatsoever in protecting or defending us. And a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just a few bad apples out there," and I agree. There are some few bad apples out there. The problem is that in a job like law enforcement,
you can't have any.
You are only as good as your weakest link, and there are a heck of a lot of weak links in there. And nobody in law enforcement, from what I saw when I worked at the prison, the good cops that worked at that prison were not holding these shady people accountable. They were non-confrontational, and they just let them go about doing their business.
Turn a blind eye.
Yeah, bringing stuff into the prison and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was no secret what was going on. They just turned a blind eye, and that is really disturbing to me. And that, I think, is exactly why a county like Wanatock County got the way that it is. Or Manitowoc, whatever it's called. That place up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that place up in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that I'm never going to ever go to. I'm never even going to be in the state of Wisconsin. Sorry if you're in Wisconsin, but I'm never going there. It's way too cold.
Yeah, there is no way I'm going there.
Yeah. So, I mean, they shouldn't have been there. None of this should have really happened. It would have been one thing if they came about it honestly. And, even the other county doing the investigation, they should have had this entire court case not even in the state of Wisconsin, because there was probably nobody in that state that hadn't heard of Steven Avery. I mean, he'd probably be hard pressed to find a jury outside of that state that had never heard of this case or heard of him. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a panel of your peers, basically, of people that don't have any feelings towards you, good or bad, and have never heard, who you are or what you might have done in the past. And I just feel like he didn't get a fair shake out of it. And it really had nothing to do with whether he did or didn't do it. It had more to do with whose lawyer was better. Was the prosecution lawyer better, or was the defender's lawyer better? And that's just disturbing to me.
Yeah, well, I don't even think it mattered what came out in court. Like, I literally feel like the prosecution, the judge, and the the county sheriff's office were all in cahoots, because listening to the judge, like him talk to Steven Avery at the end, like, that definitely doesn't sound like it was a very unbiased, listening to the facts kind of person.
Right. So let's kind of cap it there. That's, I wanted to kind of have that discussion before you talked to your friend that's a defense attorney, because he's seen this show. He has obviously a perspective of a lawyer on this case, and I didn't really want what he's going to say in this show to inform how I'm feeling about it right at this moment. And yes, there is a likelihood that I'm completely wrong and that I don't know the whole story. Fine. I can only react and form an opinion on the things that have been presented in front of me. Maybe the directors of Making a Murderer were completely one-sided. Maybe they weren't. I have no idea. This is just how I reacted to the things that I know. So
yeah,
let's go ahead and get to that interview, and we'll get together afterwards and see if our hearts and minds have changed. All right, here's the interview. You're listening to Geek Revolution Radio.
I'm here with my cousin Paul Gosnell. Say hello, Paul.
Hello.
You are a defense attorney, is that correct?
That's correct. I do criminal defense work among some of the other areas of my practice.
Yeah. And where is your practice?
Logan, Utah.
Logan, Utah. Fun. Up north in the cold portion of Utah. The very cold.
That's right. We're frozen in right now.
Okay. Well, I as a person outside of criminal justice and law. I have a certain understanding of criminal justice based off of television, but for somebody that's actually in criminal justice, what is your overall opinion of our criminal justice system and how it works today?
Well, I guess I would start off in saying, when you look back, and before I went to law school, I actually studied my undergraduate as a history major.
Uh-huh.
And we've all studied, the founding of the United States and how our criminal justice system, the ideals that it was founded on, and we wanted it to be something better than what we had before. And you'll probably recall hearing something along the lines of, there was this legal scholar around the time of the founding. His name was William Blackstone, and he wrote this treatise on the laws of England. And he came up with this famous saying, a ratio, that he said it's better that 10 guilty men should go free than one innocent man should suffer, or something along those lines. We've heard that before. It's better that the guilty go free than the innocent suffer. And so that was one of the main ideals that our criminal justice system was started on. It's because, the state has so much power that they can, they control the investigation, they control the prosecution, they control all of this.
It's all in their hands.
It's all in their hands. And so the people who get caught in the crosshairs, they have very little power to fight back against this machine that's coming at them. And so they set it up this way to kind of even the playing field, so to speak. They wanted to give the defendant sort of a home field advantage or something along those lines. So that's the way it's supposed to be set up. And the ideal behind it is that if there's ever any question, we want those questions to be resolved in everyone's mind that the person's innocent. Mm-hmm. We only want him to be found guilty if we are convinced. And that's why in the Constitution it says that they have to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. Mm-hmm. And that phrase, beyond a reasonable doubt, is not really defined. There's not
a standard.
Yeah, it is a standard. It's standard.
Like there's not like a, this is what it is. Everybody understands that's that.
Yeah, it's not like you make a ledger and you put facts on each side, and if there's more on one side, that side wins. It's left undefined so that the jurors can come up with their own understanding of it. Mm-hmm. But it is the highest standard in all of the law. In civil law, you have varying degrees of how to reach a decision. You have a preponderance of the evidence, which means more than 50%. You have clear and convincing. There are varying levels, but beyond a reasonable doubt is supposed to be the highest standard in all of the law. So that's all. Everything I just said is kind of background. That's how it's set up. That's how it's supposed to be. There's other platitudes that we look to that there's innocent until proven guilty and things, but like that.
Those all come from that basic, basic idea.
It all comes from that foundation. But they're all ideals that we hold up and we think about and we believe that they're there. But in my experience, all of those things, they're just words on paper. They don't mean a thing.
Yeah.
The way you asked me, how is the criminal justice system set up? It's set up to get convictions. That's all it is. Because once you are accused, once you are charged, if you're sitting in front of a jury, they're sitting there looking at you wondering, what did that guy do? If he did something, or else he wouldn't be here. Because everybody thinks if I don't do anything, the police aren't going to charge me with anything. But that happens. I mean, police are human. They make mistakes. Right. They don't always mean to. I don't think they're malicious, but they make mistakes. And it's not even the police making mistakes. There are vindictive people out there that will make up lies and accuse people of things. Happens all the time. There's a guy in Logan right now. You can look him up. He's being charged. With rape, and the DNA evidence came back and it's specifically excluded him. He is not among the DNA evidence. And what would you think the prosecution would do when they get that up? When they get the DNA evidence back, you think
they would drop the case?
They should drop the case, right? Nope. They are going forward and they are prosecuting the guy.
Oh, geez.
And it happens, it doesn't. We watch things like Making a Murderer, and that's really what we're talking about today is
right.
The Netflix series Making a Murderer. You watch that, and it's it shines a bright light on Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, and who I've never been to Manitowoc County, Wisconsin. After watching that show,
I don't plan.
Law enforcement did not drag me to that county.
Yeah, I was like, I will not go to that place ever. So,
but the truth of it is that sort of thing can happen anywhere. In fact, it does happen. It happens everywhere. Not quite to that extent.
I think and nobody's going away for 18 years of their life. I mean, some people do, but yeah,
lots of people do.
Yeah,
that's why we have innocence projects all over the place. That's why we have DNA exonerations happening all the time.
So. In our you and I had discussed Making a Murder a couple times after I watched the show, and you had mentioned that it's important to establish other possible suspects. Why do you think that wasn't done in the case of Making a Murderer?
Well, and I've actually learned quite a bit about that specific point since we had that discussion. And the reason you want to establish other possible suspects is because you have to give when you're arguing a case to a jury, you have to give them something that you're trying to create reasonable doubt, but you're also trying to sell them a theory of why the state's case isn't true, or not even isn't true, but might not be true.
Right.
You're trying to create reasonable doubt, and so you want to create what we call a SOTI defense. It's some other dude done it.
Oh, I see.
So you want to try and point the finger at someone else, and most other jurisdictions you're allowed to do that. For some reason, Wisconsin, and this is something I learned just in the last week or so, Wisconsin does not allow that. You cannot accuse someone else
really
in Wisconsin of being a possible perpetrator unless you have to make a specific motion to the judge 30 days before trial. And I could be wrong about the timeline, but you have to give the judge enough evidence to think that you've explored this, that you've developed enough evidence to support your theory in order to make that accusation. And I don't know why.
Right.
That could be. That robs the defendant of his defense.
Right. And so, like, if you have a partial judge who is not impartial, they might just not even consider that other option.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
In my opinion, I think the judge, in every case, should make it as fair as possible for the defendant. The defendant's going to, and it's not always it's easy for me to say that, but and judges have a hard job to do. I wasn't super impressed with this judge, but we only saw his rulings. Maybe 10 minutes out of the entire 10 hours.
Right, it was very limited.
Sitting up there, and we saw him. We heard things that he had ruled, but we didn't actually see him ruling, and we never really saw him weighing evidence and things like that. But there's going to be a lot of times in a trial where the prosecution's going to try and get evidence, and then the defense is going to object to it. And more often than not, the prosecution will be able to get it in. So that's why I think that the judge should level the playing field on the defendant's side by allowing him to explore
other options,
as much as possible, other options.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that really hurt Steven in his case.
What is the difference between being acquitted and just a general mistrial?
So an acquittal is a verdict. So if you're trying it to a judge if you're trying it to a jury, the jury has two options they can come back with. They can either come back with guilty or not guilty, and not guilty is the same thing as saying acquittal.
Acquitted, okay.
Yeah, so an acquittal is the same thing as not guilty. I suppose there's a third option they can come back with. They can come back split, and that's referred to as a hung jury.
Hung jury, yeah.
Yeah, a mistrial is generally when there's been some sort of irregularity in the trial. So if prior to the trial the judge says, I'm not letting in this specific piece of evidence, or I'm not going to let you testify. So there, in this case, apparently there were some previous interactions between Steve Avery and Teresa Hallbach.
Mm-hmm.
She had come out to the house a couple different times prior to the time when she disappeared. And one of the times that she came out, she had complained to her supervisor that when Steve answered the door, he was just wearing a towel.
Right, I'd heard that. Yeah.
So that was specifically excluded by the judge. Why, I'm not sure. Honestly, that seems like I guess he decided it was too prejudicial.
Yeah.
But it still seems to me like it should have come in. And there were other things that were excluded from trial, like Steven Avery had told other inmates about his fantasies of creating a torture chamber in his house.
Yeah.
So a mistrial would be, so if a judge has ruled that certain evidence cannot come in, a mistrial would occur if the prosecution just says, forget that judge, he doesn't know what he's talking about. If I tell this jury this piece of evidence, that's going to really be great for them. They're really going to need that. And if you introduce it, even though it's been excluded, that would be grounds for a mistrial. So if he gets a police officer or the supervisor for Auto Trader on the stand, and he starts testifying about Steven Avery answering the door in a towel, that could be grounds for a mistrial because you're tainting the jury, you're poisoning the jury with information that the judge has already decided can't come in. Another way for a mistrial, well, it's not necessarily a mistrial, but it would be more in the nature of an appeal, of a reverse on remand from the Court of Appeals, is if the judge makes some improper rulings as to evidence that he allows to come in, evidence that he excludes, witnesses that he allows to testify, or jury instructions are reasons for reversing a judgment. Okay. And one of the things that I still can't wrap my head around in watching that documentary is how that judge allowed that FBI testimony to come in. And I'm referring specifically to the blood vial. The defense was arguing that the blood was planted and that it was obtained from that blood vial that was in the blocked in the evidence. And the state said, well, if it came from that blood vial, it would contain EDTA. So we're going to get the FBI to test for EDTA. And from what I understand, that test was invented solely for this trial, has never been scientifically proven to be accurate or what level of accuracy it has. Basically, they just got someone to stand up and say, I tested it, I didn't find EDTA, and that was that.
Huh. This is just one of those circumstances where it should have been thrown out, but it wasn't.
It should have never been allowed in.
Right.
It should not have been allowed in the first place. If you'll remember, he even testified that 3 of the blood swabs that he did not even test didn't have EDTA.
Yeah. So,
which is just absurd.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts of the special prosecutor, drawing a blank on his name, but the main
Ken
Kratz, that's it.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, he was a very effective attorney. He got his conviction off of a very flimsy case.
Yeah.
So on that side of things, I guess he did a really good job. I could not stand his voice.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed too.
I couldn't stand his smug little face with his stupid little mustache.
I really didn't like that special press conference he did.
Yeah,
with the revealing of. Go ahead.
I was just getting to that. That he almost had a smile on his face the entire time that he's describing this sexual torture. And we find out later why he was enjoying that so much because of his
with his sexting.
His sexting and he enjoys taking advantage of vulnerable women apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, he and we watched. They only showed us a portion of that interview, so I don't really know. I'm talking about Brendan Dassey.
Right.
They don't really show the whole thing, and you wouldn't expect them to. They said. I
mean, they do show you just the parts where it seems like they're making a young man vulnerable.
Yeah. Right. They show you, and the police interrogations are. I mean, they've got that down to a science.
Oh yeah,
the the police and the detectives can make you say essentially anything they want you to say. To a certain extent, I should say. I mean, you watch, they interrogate Steven Avery, and he actually holds up pretty well.
Right.
But they use a specific technique, and they use this in almost every police interrogation. They give you two options. All right, so they sit Steven Avery down, and they say, Steve, we know you're not a cold-blooded murderer, so this must have been an accident. Tell us how this was an accident.
Like
so
a softer side,
Yeah, they give you two options in that scenario. Either A, you're a cold-blooded killer, or B, it was an accident. Tell us how it was an accident. Either way,
you're going to reveal. Yeah, you're going to get into it.
Yeah, you're if you and they keep going down that road. The other thing they do is they will not take a denial. They will not accept a denial. So anytime you give them an answer that's a denial,
they just keep going back at it.
No. Let me ask you this a different way.
Right.
Tell me what, and you see that more so in Brendan Dassey's case, where they keep telling Brendan, they say, now be honest. Tell us what happened. We already know what happened. We just want you to tell us what happened. Yeah. So they're already setting the scenario for Brendan. He's thinking, they know something that happened. The answer I just gave wasn't what happened. So I need to give them a different answer until I can figure out what
they're looking for. Yeah. Do you think there's a question of ethics with that? Like, at least in Brendan Dassey's case.
There's so many questions with ethics with that. First, he doesn't have his mother present.
Yeah.
And not necessarily that parents aren't always the best people to have in interrogations with you, because parents can fall into the same trap.
Right.
Where they think, oh crap, what did my kid do? You better be honest and tell them what happened. So they can actually help out the prosecution on that and help draw out false confessions.
Yeah.
Attorneys are usually who you want there, but detectives don't want attorneys there because they we just get in the way. We tell our client, don't answer.
Yeah,
that.
Don't say a single thing. Right.
Don't answer that, because you don't want to give them information. Yeah. They're trying to lock you away for the rest of your life. Why do you want to give them information?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say in closing, to wrap it up, we look at this case 10 years later. Everybody's watched the video. I mean, not everybody, but the people who have, as a defense attorney, what are his options now? What do you think his options are currently?
For Steven Avery or for Brendan Dassey?
Or really for both.
Brendan Dassey's got a really good case. Because his first attorney, or I guess it's actually his second attorney,
the guy that I want to punch?
Yeah, the guy that you want to punch, and his investigator that you'd also like to kick in the shin.
Yeah.
He's got a federal case, federal habeas case, because he had ineffective assistance of counsel. In fact, it went so far beyond the pale of ineffective, he was actually working for the other side. Now, an attorney always has the duty of loyalty to their client. They have to represent their client's best interest. Now, a lot of times, and don't get me wrong, a lot of times your client's best interests involve working out a deal with the prosecution to lessen the penalties that your client is going to face. More often than not, the police are going to get the right person. They are going to charge you with the right crimes. And sometimes they may overcharge you, so you may try and whittle down those and whittle down the penalties. And so sometimes you're just trying to mitigate the damage for your client.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it is in your client's best interest to work with the prosecution as much as possible. But in this case, where you've got a client that's telling you, no, I didn't do it. They got to my head. They forced a false confession out of me, and you've got to take what your client tells you and go with that. You've got to give your client the best defense possible. He didn't give him a defense at all. I mean, it was basically two prosecutors working. They just assigned a prosecutor to this kid.
Yeah, he had nobody on his side.
So he's getting a new trial at the very least. And I would imagine once this new trial comes with all this, with all this media attention, I think that he gets an acquittal.
Oh, okay.
With Steven, it's a little bit more difficult because he can't argue an effective assistance of counsel. Anybody who's watched that show,
his attorneys were awesome. Yeah,
his attorneys were rock stars. I mean, they were great. They did everything they needed to do. And I thought they argued it as well as they could.
Right.
So he can't really do that. So his relief is going to come in what, and he's already gone through all of his standard appeals and lost those. But so it's going to have to rely on his new attorney finding new evidence that wasn't available or wasn't presented at trial. And the evidence has to be sufficient enough that it would question the verdict. Court of Appeals and Supreme Courts are notorious for calling new evidence and arguments harmless error. They don't like to overturn verdicts. And so he's going to have to find something that's so beyond the pale. He's going to have to find that there was EDTA in that blood in that car or something of that nature in order to get relief. The other way he could get relief is if there was some irregularity in the jury deliberations. And the only way to do that, from what I understand in Wisconsin, is you essentially have to have a prosecutor come forward and say, we were looking up stuff on the internet. If you'll recall, they didn't actually use Brendan Dassey's confession in the trial.
In his case, yeah.
So if one of the jurors was aware of that Brendan Dassey confession and came in and said, look, they didn't tell you this, but his nephew admitted to all of this and said that he did it. If there was someone in there that considered that information, then that could undo the trial, the guilty verdict as well. And quite honestly, that wouldn't surprise me. I heard two of the jurors were related to Manitowoc County officials in some way. One of them, I think, worked for Manitowoc County, and the other was like a spouse of a sheriff or something. And how those people got on the jury, I can't even imagine. Right.
So that's basically his best case or best scenario of getting out of prison.
Yeah, either new evidence or a juror comes forward and says the jury was tampered with.
But at this point, things aren't looking too hopeful.
Well, I don't know. I mean
it's still. Well, I guess it's still kind of up in the air. The documentary has definitely shown light, but
yeah, I think what gives me the best hope, if I'm going to hope for Steve Avery to get out, and let me be clear about one thing, is I'm not sure that he's innocent.
Yeah.
But, I'm just going off of what I've read in the media and what I've watched on the series. And the series is an excellent job of storytelling by those two documentarians.
Right.
You could tell that they think he's innocent, and they tell a fascinating story, a story that should terrify anyone about the power of the police to plant evidence and to frame you. I mean, you take a step back and you think, here's a guy that was suing the sheriff's department, was exposing their corruption, and was about ready to essentially bankrupt them and take all their jobs away. You'd have to think all of them were going to get fired.
Yeah.
And what fortune they had that the one guy that was doing all of that, the same week that he starts his depositions, decides to murder someone. I mean, it's just the coincidence is too much for me to take there. And it's the villains in the story, they do a very good job of painting, that sheriff department as the villains, and probably deservedly so. It seems clear that at least that key was planted.
Yeah, there's definitely some questionable actions and some questionable people when you watch the documentary.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, Paul. It's been a really good interview. Definitely really good insight in terms of providing an understanding that, the layman person, like somebody like myself or Ryan, who's my co-host, don't really think about. Hearing an attorney's kind of take on it is really helpful. So I really appreciate it.
Sure, you bet. No problem.
All right, there you have it. A big thanks to Paul Gosnell for putting together his time to do that interview with Will, and thanks to Will for putting that together. Now,
I was really, really happy with the way it came out. It was a really good interview. He definitely gave us some good insight.
Yeah, it's good to see somebody's perspective that's kind of in the business, as they say. I think it's it's kind of surprising to me a little bit. I kind of expected that I was going to be, told I was flat out wrong about everything. But it's nice to hear that maybe he's not as tainted as I am or as cynical as I am. But there's definitely some issues going on here that I think really need to be examined and ought to be.
There's definitely need for reform, I think.
Yeah, and and it kind of goes back to with the whole the nephew Brendan. I think the show did definitely show that he kind of got the short end of the stick, and his original lawyer was the worst guy ever. And one thing we didn't talk about, and I don't know why it never came up, but did you ever notice anytime they were ever interviewing that first lawyer that he had, he would just beam and smile on camera, like this was for him to be in front of a camera was.
I refer to it with Paul as the lawyer I want to punch. yeah, that's how I refer
right
to
in
him.
His stupid face.
Yeah, smug look.
Yeah, since we recorded the first part of this show a couple of days ago, I went through and kind of read through what I guess information out there people are saying points to Steven Avery's guilt, in this whole thing that they say wasn't covered in the show. And I listened to a couple of interviews with Steven's lawyers, because I feel like of anybody in this whole thing, that his two lawyers are the two guys that are the easiest to trust out of everybody. They are the ones that know what happened. They're as frustrated as the rest of us are. And there was this big hubbub going around about, DNA underneath the handle on the RAV4. I think we mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah, it came up
earlier in the
bit.
show. And Steven's lawyers said that the type of evidence that was found in there, I guess, was sweat or something like that. And
it was just unknown. It was like unknown DNA.
They said that it was just as easily that it could have been put there by the gloves of the person following over the vehicle than anything else. And he says that the prosecutor, this Katz guy that's, obviously a horrible human being.
Yeah, Kratz is a horrible person.
Yeah, Kratz, that he is basically putting all this misinformation out there in the media on this case that,
because he doesn't want to come back on him. He wants to look good.
So, they said that's, in the interview I saw, I think it was on the Adam Carolla show, he said that's the most frustrating part about this whole thing is that the Kratz guy is still putting tons of misinformation out there, and it's the whole thing is really frustrating. And basically where it lands at, and you guys kind of went over this a little bit in the interview, is that Brendan is likely to get a retrial because of how terrible his lawyer was, which is good.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think anybody that watches the documentary can see that this kid was really manipulated in the interview process,
and he wasn't properly represented either.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't have really good lawyers helping him defending his case. Like if he says he's innocent, they have to roll with that, but they didn't roll with it.
Yeah. So this is kind of where it rolls from there. Steven Avery, on the other hand, he has kind of a much more uphill battle to go through. He has gone through all of his appeal processes and is likely not to get a retrial. In order for him to get a retrial, kind of two things would have to happen. One of the two things would have to happen. New evidence would have to be brought in that proves his innocence, and maybe something can come out of the retrial of Brendan Dassey to cause that retrial.
There, or if the DNA or not the. Well, Paul was mentioning the chemical that was found in blood to keep it liquefied or whatever. If they could actually have a test, because the
that
test
actually
that was
proves
conducted,
it.
The test that was done Paul talked about it. He said that the test that they did was so improven and so misleading or like not reliable that he feels like that in itself was a reason to mistrial. And so he thinks if they can find evidence to say that that blood sample in the RAV4 had that chemical, then maybe there's a reason for a mistrial.
Yeah, and then the second thing I guess that could get him a retrial is if something came out where the jurors were getting bad info or were being unduly swayed one way or the other, or if they were using their biases to make their decision.
Yeah, and Paul had mentioned that basically he thinks two of the jurors might have even had connections with the county the county office.
Yeah, that's
like either.
That's so crazy.
Which is crazy. He's like, that enough is a reason to question the jurors.
I would really, I hope that he does get a retrial based, just basically based on the way it goes. And I hope that when they do the retrial, they have it as far away from that county as possible.
Yeah.
And then after that, if they still find him guilty, then maybe we can put this thing to rest.
Yeah, but they could put it to rest. But because there's so, like, and this is what Paul said at the beginning of the interview, there needs to be reasonable doubt. And if there's reasonable doubt, which there's a lot of,
there's a ton of reasonable
doubt. The state needs to come up with better evidence, better reasoning for why he's guilty, which I just felt like there was way too much reasonable doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Well, it's really fun discussing these cases. It's good that we're passionate about it because, I hope that justice finds a way, and I hope that, our justice system is able to improve upon itself constantly, because there's a lot of room for improvement, unfortunately. But, hopefully they're, moving in the right direction where all of, I think DNA is playing an important role in getting a lot of people that either are guilty and should be in prison or aren't guilty and shouldn't be in prison. It's kind of helping sort all that out. And I think that as those methodologies improve, like you said, with the blood test thing, that maybe, we can get to the bottom of, undoubtedly what actually happened in not only this, but all cases throughout the U.S. So the true crime stuff is really fun to follow, though.
Yeah, I love what Paul said at the very beginning. He like the old notion that it's better for 10 guilty men to go free than one guilty man be locked away in prison.
I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, and I'm not a criminal by any stretch of the imagination,
right? But
I feel far more comfortable knowing that criminals are getting off more than, like you said, than innocent men spending 18 years in prison. I mean, it's
right.
And when we really look at the whole thing, I mean, there was a very big reason for them to convict Steven Avery, and that is that word or group of words is $36 million.
Right.
There's because they put
a lot of.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the end, if he was guilty, then the show title, Making a Murderer, held true, and something, happened with this guy in prison that caused him to come out on the other side and do these horrendous things. And on the other flip side of the show, if he's innocent, then it's a story about them putting together a guy as a murderer and them making him into a murderer when he is in fact not a murderer. So I really like the kind of play on words that they chose to
definitely
use
an interesting title.
The title of the show, yeah. So all right, well, let's wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I'll probably be on the other Mike and Mike show in a week or two talking about this very topic again, and they, I'm sure, have different opinions than us. So you can maybe get if you like the true crime stuff as much as we do, you can get another fix and hear different opinions about it over there. And you're welcome to share your opinions of what you think went on, or maybe we missed things or forgot to mention things, or there's probably plenty of things we don't know. Because there's a lot of information out there.
A lot of information about this case.
Yeah, so if you want to get if you want to become a part of the discussion, head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Geek Revolution Radio, and that's kind of where we do a lot of interacting between shows. So thanks for listening to the show. Will, thanks for putting together that interview. I really appreciate it. Make sure you tell Paul that we're really thankful as well. And until next time, I'm Ryan.
I'm Will.
Live long and prosper, and may the force be with you always. GeekRevolutionRadio.com.
You've been listening to Geek Revolution Radio, hosted by William Hatton and Ryan Bennett. For more information about Geek Revolution Radio, go to GeekRevolutionRadio.com. Feel free to interact with the show at Facebook.com/GeekRevolutionRadio. The intro song is called What You Want. The credit song is Riptide. Both are composed by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons. The views and opinions expressed on Geek Revolution Radio are those of the panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of our sponsors. Thank you for listening.